So as most of you know, the draft combine is underway. We've been getting our first looks at the top prospects in this upcoming draft. A lot of these prospects have either confirmed or implied they've had meetings with the Bulls thus far, including 3 of the top 4 prospects in Devanza, Peterson, and Wilson. I actually haven't yet to see Bulls reporters confirm that Boozer has indeed had a meeting with the Bulls, at least at the time of this recording anyway. And you also have had some other later projected prospects confirming meetings with the Bulls, like Nate Ament and Quaintance, players who could still be available by the 15th pick, but also could otherwise indicate the Bulls are potentially trading up. But regardless, while I'll talk about the draft combine and some of the results coming out of it in a future video, likely my next video, what I actually wanted to discuss in this one was the growing debate, the growing discussion among Bulls fans on what Josh Giddey's long-term fit is with this team and whether or not the Bulls would actually look to trade him. Yes, trade Josh Giddey as early as this offseason. Does that make sense? Would it be a mistake on the part of the Bulls if they go down that route? Well, let's talk about it. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. This topic of Giddey's long-term fit with the Bulls really started to come about when Bryson Graham gave his introductory press conference, in which he started talking about the type of player that he values and how this draft, was going to be the foundational piece for how they're going to structure this team going forward, going as far as to say that no player was truly untouchable and wouldn't commit to calling any player on the roster out by name, that they would be here for the long term, even including Modest Bucelis. Now, it doesn't mean that Graham doesn't believe any of these players have a future with this team. He very well could still feel that some of the guys are good fits with what they're trying to do, but just notable that he didn't call any player out by name. And then, of course, the slap profile that everyone has been talking about: size, length, athleticism, and physicality. Let's be real, that does not scream the type of player that Josh Giddey is. Sure, he has size, has some length, but he's not athletic and he's not very physical, especially on defense. Although I would argue on offense, he has improved his overall physicality and with his ability to use his size to get into the paint and finish at the basket. But in any event, just based on all this information, and most importantly, the fact that AK is no longer running things, the guy who was a big proponent and heavily pursued Josh Giddey as part of that Alex Caruso trade, with a new man in charge, he has no attachments to Giddey. He wasn't the one who brought him in and signed him to that extension, so sure, it's safe to say there is a world where Giddey might not be in a Bulls uniform long term. And this debate picked up even further traction when you heard Brett Siegel from Clutch Points mention to quote-unquote keep an eye on Giddey's future in Chicago over the next several weeks, suggesting he might be on the move this summer. Now, a few thoughts on all this, because while I agree, no one on this roster, yes, even including Modest, should be considered untouchable. None of these guys on the team, as they currently stand, are future superstars in the making. And given everything we saw last season, everything from members of the front office, coaching staff, all the way down to the players, everything should be on the table. And yes, that includes Josh Giddey. That said, I do think, unless you can get some kind of crazy haul for Giddey, which I'll talk about in a minute, but unless you can get a massive return for him, that is just too good to pass up. I think it would be a mistake on the part of the Bulls to trade Josh Giddey before even seeing how he would look with the added draft prospects and any potential new free agents you sign, especially if you get one of the bigger name center free agents. Like, say what you will about Giddey and his flaws. We all know he has weaknesses. He's not the fastest player. He's never going to be good on defense. In fact, he's a defensive liability, with teams hunting him more often than not. He's an extremely gifted passer with impeccable court vision, but at times he can be prone to turnovers with some of his decision-making and so-so ball handling skills. And yes, the advanced metrics, they do not always like him, even though I would argue it's because he hasn't been on the best teams throughout his career, except for that final season in OKC. But you cannot deny that one of the things Giddey is best at is facilitating on offense. He is a productive player, and each season with the Bulls, he has gotten better, improved a lot of aspects of his game. The on-off numbers have been improved, and he has been a bigger impact player on winning. And then the other argument is, well, you can say Giddey hasn't really been set up for success, that he hasn't had a roster that is tailored around his skills. Giddey thrives around shooters and rim running bigs that are elite in the pick and roll. He did not have that under the Bulls with Nikola Vucevic, nor did he have it in OKC with that final season when Chet finally played, because Isaiah Hartenstein did not come into the picture until after the Thunder traded Josh Giddey. When the Bulls actually added a lob threat big man, a below average center in Nick Richards, you saw some great two-man action and easy pick and roll lobs between Giddey and Nick Richards. That was Nick Richards we're talking about here. Imagine what could potentially be unlocked with a higher level big playing alongside Josh Giddey. Imagine what Caleb Wilson and his leaping ability, speed, and athleticism getting easy feeds from Josh Giddey around the basket. Or say Quaintance, I know I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong, but the guy coming out of Kentucky. If they take him number 15, or Ade Mara, if they trade up to get him, or if he somehow falls to 15. Or on the free agency front, adding a guy like Walker Kessler or Isaiah Hartenstein if the Thunder decline his team option and let him walk. Or, and again, I know I've said this before, I still think it's unlikely, but I wouldn't rule it out entirely, Jalen Duren, especially if he continues to bomb in the playoffs for the Pistons. So to me, I think it would be a disservice to the Bulls to simply move on from Josh Giddey this quickly without seeing what he could do with some of the new talented players that are projected to come into the roster. Like, you at least should give it up until the trade deadline before you say, yeah, you know what, this isn't going to work based on the initial results of him with the new look roster. The other way I look at it too is this. Yes, I think Giddey is a good player. I'm more high on Giddey than I think a lot of people are, because even though I think he's not a player you build around, he is a player you can build with as the organizer of an offense. But what could you even get for Giddey right now anyway, in the form of a trade? Like, realistically, who this offseason is going to be going after Giddey? Would the Magic look to add him because they need a true point guard that can run their garbage offense? They don't really have the assets to make a play at him that would entice the Bulls. Yeah, they could throw us Jalen Suggs, but then you kind of have to deal with his contract and his offensive limitations. They don't have first round picks to trade, and the Bulls shouldn't even think about trading Giddey if it doesn't come with a first round pick. I can't see a team like Boston going after Giddey, even though they need a point guard. I would maybe say the Rockets, but they're supposed to be getting Fred VanVleet back next season. The Suns, I just don't see that many teams in need for Giddey's services. Either they already have their point guard role established, or they have a more ball dominant star level player on the roster, and they're not going to bring in someone who is going to take the ball out of that star's hands. So, yes, it's all good and well to say, well, the Bulls should just trade Giddey and completely start fresh in this current draft. But there has to be interest from the other party, and there has to be enough value the Bulls would be getting in return in order to justify trading one of the best pass-first guards in the game. Like I said at the top of the video, unless they would be getting a crazy haul where some team is willing to offer the Bulls multiple first-round picks, it isn't worth it for now anyway. Not when we haven't seen this new roster and how it's going to look, what potential players the Bulls are going to be able to add, and actually see Giddey's fit with these new players. And if we're being honest here, teams aren't going to be willing to relinquish first round picks like they used to. Not under the new lottery system that is being proposed. Yes, it hasn't been approved yet. It's possible there could be some tweaks to it. But with the 3-2-1 lottery system, with flattened odds, the addition of playoff teams being included into the lottery, yeah, teams are going to be much more protective of their future picks than they ever were before. And I just don't think it makes sense to sell low on Giddey just because he doesn't fit the slap profile. Now, maybe there's a world where the Bulls use Giddey as a trade chip to move up in the draft. Maybe they could entice the Hawks with Giddey if it means the Bulls can snag the 8th pick, or even the Mavs with the 9th pick. The Kings, everyone likes to take advantage of the Kings, and they need a point guard, by the way. Would they part with the 7th pick for Giddey? I don't know. I don't really see any of those scenarios happening anyway. So yeah, I personally think it would be a mistake to move Giddey this summer. At least give it a season, or at minimum closer to the trade deadline, to see what you have with this new roster under the new draft picks, and then you can assess at that time closer to February. My guess is, given Bryson Graham's patient approach and being pretty clear that this is going to take some time, he's going to see what he has with Giddey before making any rash decisions. Just my perspective though. I would love to hear what you guys think. Let me know in the comments. How do you think the Bulls should approach the future of Josh Giddey with this team? Let me know. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.